So let's have a look around the Scottish Learning Festival 2019. I made quite a long video about my visit to this last year. I'll put a link at the end. There's a few more interesting things I found having a wander this time. Let's see what we get to. What have we got here? Massage in schools. And you see the picture here of pupils massaging each other in primary school. Now my intuition about this is there's something not quite right here. I mean, what about personal boundaries? There's a big emphasis on primary schools and secondary schools, teaching them about their personal space, consent, etc. But with this, it's encouraging them to be very intimate with every classmate. And I think that's not quite right. If they're talking about protecting children from abuse, then I don't think this is really helping them, because it's giving the message you can be physically intimate with, well, pretty well anyone, really. I don't think it helps. Also, I think with massage, there can be a bit of a sort of proto-sexual element to it. I talked to my wife about this. I said to her, if I came home from work one day and said, I was really stressed, but one of the young female members of staff gave me a massage and then I felt much better, she said she would not be happy. Because that would seem like being unfaithful. It's too intimate for some types of relationship. You might say with a professional masseurs, it might be different. I don't know. But towards the end of primary school, there are romantic desires awakening among the pupils. And then if they've been made to think this sort of massaging each other is normal, that will carry on into secondary school as well. And you can easily imagine the situation where one of the two pupils is just thinking, oh, this is relaxing, this is like emotional therapy. But the other one's thinking, you know, they quite fancy this person. There's a romantic element to it as well. Even leaving that aside, a couple of 10-year-old boys, I think massaging each other is not the right sort of relationship. It's the wrong sort of intimacy. They should be sharing activities, having fun together, chatting, whatever. But this massaging in class, it fits in well with Scottish education, therapeutic, implying that it takes a massive effort to cope with the emotions of everyday life and everyday relationships. But for the vast majority of pupils, that just isn't true. And there are lots and lots of stalls on the Scottish Learning Festival with things on this same therapeutic theme. Like this next one, in fact. Calmer class. Again, to do with emotions. So much in Scottish education is to do with emotion. Generally speaking, females tend to take more interest in and talk about emotions more. Males tend to do that less. Scottish education is very female dominated in the staff, but also the whole culture coming from the government, coming all through it, is towards this emphasis on emotion. So it could be seen as a form of feminization. And I think it would tend to create an education system where girls maybe feel a little bit more comfortable than boys. So calmer class, how is this achieved? Well, it's mindfulness, which is basically Buddhism light. And I would say there's a finite amount of time in school. And the more and more use of it on these therapeutic exercises, the less there is to use on real education. Right, carrying on with the same theme, the well-being obsession. Shinari, the well-being indicators. The Scottish government's come up with these well-being indicators to check that children are okay, basically, to make sure that they're safe, healthy, active, nurtured, achieving, respected, responsible, included. Shinari is the acronym. Now, it's very unbalanced. It teaches kids that they're delicate flowers expected to wilt at any moment under the slightest pressure or discomfort. But what we've got here is a poster company, and they've got a poster about Shinari for putting up outdoors. It's a weatherproof one. So imagine this stuck on the playground wall. Let's see what the poster says. Outside classroom boards, weatherproof Shinari in my world. What I need from people. Guidance, supporting me to make the right choices, everyday care and help, knowing what's going to happen and when. Nurtured, having a nurturing place to live in a family setting with additional help if needed, or where that's not possible, in a suitable care setting. Who on earth thinks that there's any value in sticking this up on the outside wall of the school, in the playground, or whatever? I mean, it's just bizarre. It's not just an obsession with well-being, it's just delusional. It's like a quasi-magical belief system in which posting the sacred Shinari text in strategic positions wards off negative thoughts or something. Right, where are we going to next? Poppy, Scotland. Now, I called in at Poppy Scotland last year at the stall. I had a long chat with the chap there. It was a nice bloke. And I've got a lot of time for Poppy Scotland. I really support their basic mission. But I commented on their resources last year that it was so politically correct, social justice driven. I mean, basically, they were looking at the First World War, but the things they featured were anyone and everything apart from white adult males who fought, suffered and died for their country. And I thought with that, it looks to me like they're cozying up to government departments to try and make sure the funding keeps flowing. And I went along this year, what have they got? They've got a lorry that opens up to make a big mobile classroom full of computer screens and all sorts. Must have cost tens and tens of thousands of pounds. But they've obviously played their cards right to get their money from government agencies one way or another. Right, what next? I went to a seminar run by Education Scotland, and it was by their Improving Gender Balance team. Now, they're very concerned that boys and girls are still choosing subjects that they're interested in instead of splitting 50-50 in all subjects. And they had this table, and it shows a pretty big split between boys and girls in different subjects. Some subjects almost completely female, some subjects almost completely male. And they said even the subjects in the middle, where there's a 50-50 split, like, say, chemistry or maths, they said quite often the boys do them, for example, with chemistry. The boys do it because they like it. The girls do it because they need it, like they want to be a doctor or whatever. So again, they were saying even when it's 50-50, there's still a problem to try to solve, apparently. And they showed this graph, showing the changes in proportions of boys and girls doing different subjects since 1986. And you can see there's basically no change. Right when I was doing my teacher training, but even going back 33 years, since then they've been trying to break down stereotypes, get more girls doing physics or whatever. They've been trying for 33 years and longer, and have achieved absolutely nothing. In the question time, I asked the lady running it, I said, might it be that the difference in interest between boys and girls, which can be measured on day one of life, so you can forget about social influence as a total explanation, maybe that's the reason for it. And what you're effectively doing here is this Education Scotland waging war on human nature. And the lady, she wasn't particularly hostile to me, but the discussion moved on pretty quickly and my point wasn't really answered. But this department in Education Scotland has got 6 staff. They're paying 6 people to try to get boys and girls to choose subjects that they don't really want to do. So if ever your school is short of a teacher in a certain subject, just remember there's 6 people being paid at Education Scotland to do this. Right, I'll just read a little bit of one of their handouts they gave out. It just makes me think we need to be teaching logic in schools. Listen to this. Research strongly suggests that there is no inherent difference between boys and girls which should limit their interests, capabilities, or ambitions. Right, no inherent difference that should limit their interest, capabilities. Well, of course, it shouldn't limit them. There might be differences that affect their interests. There are not really differences in capabilities. They're very small differences in capabilities between boys and girls in different areas. But their ambitions are often quite different as well. But then it says, and yet we recognise that subject choice and many subsequent work and life choices are highly gendered. It just doesn't make sense. Okay, there's no difference between boys and girls that should limit their interests, but they generally tend to have different interests, so they pick different subjects. I mean, whoever wrote that and whoever's proofread it and approved it, I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. Anyway, moving on, I went to the CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. They have an educational wing that delivers activities in schools. There was a young lady there. I had a chat with her and I said, this looks to me like blatant indoctrination. She said she couldn't really answer that. She didn't really deal with that side of things. I said, does anyone put the other side of the argument in schools? She said, oh, maybe the army. Do they? Even the tiny number of schools who have a combined cadet force, I don't think they spend the sessions presenting the argument for a nuclear deterrent. But in Scottish schools, it's open season for anyone with a left, liberal, secular, progressive idea to come in and preach to the kids. Just as an aside there, the Scottish Family Party is neutral on nuclear weapons, by the way. Right, what do we get to next? I got to this little sign here. It's a myth that English, maths and science are the most important subjects. That was intriguing. Improve pupil outcomes through the power of singing. Now, those signs were up at a project that runs choir competitions for schools. They look quite good. But the emphasis, often in Scottish education, is on anything but traditional academic subjects. So the key to better attainment in maths and English, the key to everything, is always emotional well-being. There's always some indirect route to it. There's always some unusual activity that's actually going to make all the difference, rather than teaching maths and English better and having the kids working harder at them. Right, another stall, what do we find here? A school newspaper. So it's a newspaper produced to sell to schools, and then the schools put it in their libraries or classrooms or whatever for children to look at. I'll be brief with this. I mean, you know what's coming, don't you? I mean, here's one edition. Front cover, some kids who were flown over from Africa to campaign against climate change. An article about explaining Donald Trump's tan. It's obviously a bit mocking. Big double-page spread about veganism. They took the opportunity to put the word bonkers next to a picture of Boris Johnson. So why do we end up with newspapers like this? I mean, partly, it's no worse than the BBC, really. But the people making this newspaper are selling to teachers. Teachers in general, not all by a long, long way, but in general would tend to be a bit more sort of left liberal leaning, and that's the actual market. And they would have no qualms in passing these on to the children and influencing their worldview through it. Right, I went to have a chat with a few councils as well. I went to one in particular. I won't mention which one it was. I wouldn't want to identify anyone. But they got a booklet about restorative approaches there. This idea that punishment bad, mini counselling sessions good. I mean, it's disastrous for discipline in schools. The pupils think it's a complete joke and they end up running riot in many cases. So I was chatting away and one person said to me, "Oh, but surely, you're a good person. You don't need the threat of punishment to obey the law, do you?" And I said, "Well, yes, I do actually. I mean, for example, when I'm driving my car, I would probably drive a bit faster if it wasn't for the fear of getting caught and getting a fine or worse. So that makes me obey the law." Anyway, so we chatted for a while, and I think she was sort of coming over to my way of thinking a little bit. But then she said, "What do you think of getting it right for every child, the government's overall approach for dealing with children?" She said, "Can you just come over here?" So she would took me a little bit away from the stall so no one else could hear what she was saying. And she said, "Yeah, what do you think about it?" So I spoke to her about it. I said about schnorrification and the problems I see with it. And she didn't explicitly say she agreed, but it looked like she was nodding and thinking, yeah, she did quite agree. But then someone from the stall called her back and said, "Right, could you come back here? Could you come back?" So she went back again. So I think maybe she just had a little moment there of critical thinking and exposure to heretical ideas, but she was soon pulled back into the consensus and will be joining in all the regular conversations again from now on, I would imagine. But it was an interesting chat. And around the Learning Festival, there was lots of good stuff as well, from Historic Scotland stuff, great, really good technology things, some science things. I put a link to last year's video as well. You can see some of the things that were there again this year. But we really need a culture change in Scottish schools. And the Scottish Family Party sees it. No party in the Scottish Parliament does. They don't even get close to understanding anything about the philosophy of education and what's wrong with it in Scotland. So if you want to support our campaign to change this through politics, then do join the Scottish Family Party. There's a link below this video. And thanks for watching.